Welcome to the Majestic Truth Podcast. Join us as we delve into the mysteries of the universe, explore the unexplained, and shed light on some of the most important events that have occurred and are occurring in our world today. Get ready to open your mind, expand your horizons, and discover the extraordinary. This is the Majestic Truth Podcast. And now your host, Michelle.
Welcome back, Truth Seekers, to another episode of the Majestic Truth Podcast, the show that explores the most intriguing mysteries and unexplained phenomena from our world and beyond. I'm your host, Michelle, and today we're delving into the mysterious events of the chilling Salem Witch Trials. Before we kick off the show here, head on over to majestictruth.com/episode 14. It has the overview of this particular episode. Now, before I give you a brief event summary, I have some breaking news to share with you. For all you awesome listeners out there who listened to episode number 12 about human trafficking awareness and prevention, I saw this clip I want to play for you. It's a clip from October 25th between Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri and the director of the Office of Refugee Resettlement about the ongoing child migrant crisis at the southern border and the 85,000 children that the Biden administration has lost track of. Take a listen to this clip.
Every child gets a Know Your Rights presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that before or after you release them to labor traffickers?
Senator, every child that comes into our care gets a Know Your Rights presentation as well as...
Have you read these New York Times reports, these stories, the series of stories the New York Times has done on the children who are in your care? Have you read them?
Yes, I have.
Have you read that children are scrubbing dishes, they are operating heavy machinery, they are delivering meals, they are harvesting coffee, they are working construction, they are working as housekeepers, they are working overnight shifts at plants where they are not paid, they are not going to school, they are not cared for, they are not giving meals, almost all of it illegally. Are you aware of that? That's a yes or no.
Yes.
Do the Know Your Rights presentation help them in those situations?
Senator, ORR...
That's a yes or no, I think. Do you really think that you're helping these children by releasing them to labor traffickers and, yes, sex traffickers? 85,000 children whom you have no contact with, and your answer is we gave them a presentation before we turned them over to these people who are exploiting them on a scale not seen in this country for 100 years.
Well done, Senator Hawley. This is just complete and utter inexcusable madness. But I'd like to personally thank this senator for taking on this fight and pray he continues his quest for justice for these children and swift justice to those complacent and compliant in these horrific crimes. Now, something I should have mentioned in that episode about human trafficking prevention and awareness, and it's super important, and everyone should know this, is the hand signal created as a way for people to indicate they are at risk of abuse and need help. It's a hand gesture where you put the palm of your hand up, then tuck your thumb into your palm, and then trap it by wrapping your other four fingers around your thumb. We will have an image of this on majestictruth.com/episode 14 page so you can see an illustration of this gesture. So if you see someone doing this, it's a signal to get help. They are in danger. The more people who know this, and the more we bring awareness to this, and the more we educate ourselves on human trafficking prevention and awareness, the more we take the power away from these criminals and hopefully put an end to these horrific crimes. Just unbelievable. It's just so disturbing what is happening all over the world, not just in this country. It's all over the world. And we can't stick our heads in the sand, people. There's so many good people out there, and I know it's really hard to listen and hear about what is happening to these children and people, not just girls, it's boys too, men. It's so tragic, and awareness the more awareness we have and the more we educate ourselves on what is truly happening, the greater the chance of putting an end to these horrific crimes. So please listen to that episode on human trafficking awareness and prevention. It talks about the signs to look for and just an overview of trafficking in general, not just sex trafficking, but organ trafficking, labor trafficking. It's out of control. It needs to be stopped. And it starts with educating ourselves. All right, so this episode today, we are covering the Salem Witch Trials. I mean, this is airing on Halloween after all. Happy Halloween. And it seems fitting. So here's a summary. In the early spring of 1692, the small colonial town of Salem, Massachusetts, became a breeding ground for fear, suspicion, and mass hysteria. The roots of the Salem Witch Trials can be traced back to the troubled times of Puritan New England, a society founded upon strict religious beliefs and a zealous desire to purify the Church of England. The Puritans' religious beliefs permeated every aspect of their lives. Their devout faith shaped their laws, customs, and interactions, leaving little room for individuality or dissent. They believed in a strict moral code, shunning anything they considered sinful or devilish, and imposing severe punishments on those who deviated from the accepted path. It is within this repressive and authoritarian climate that the events of Salem Village unfolded. In February 1692, a group of young girls, including Betty Paris, Abigail Williams, Ann Putnam Jr., and Elizabeth Hubbard, began exhibiting peculiar behaviors that baffled the community. They experienced convulsions, fits, and episodes during which they claimed to see and be tormented by spectral beings. Faced with these inexplicable occurrences, the villagers turned to their religious beliefs for answers. They believed that Satan had infiltrated their midst, utilizing witches as his agents. Witchcraft, as viewed by the Puritans, was a pact with the devil, the practice of unholy magic that threatened the very foundation of their society. The demonization of witches and the belief in their existence were deeply ingrained in the culture. As fear and panic spread like wildfire, accusations of witchcraft began to fly. What initially appeared to be isolated incidents soon grew into full-blown witch hunts. Denouncements, suspicions, and paranoia engulfed the town, turning neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. The accused were predominantly women, viewed as vulnerable to demonic influence due to their supposed inherent weakness and susceptibility. However, men and even children were not exempt from being labeled as witches, demonstrating this indiscriminate nature of these accusations. With the mounting accusations and the widespread belief in supernatural forces at work, the authorities in Salem attempted to establish order amid the chaos. A legal framework was established to deal with those accused of witchcraft, and the courts sought to determine guilt or innocence. The trials, however, were anything but fair. The court relied heavily on spectral evidence, which allowed the jurors to consider dreams, visions, or reports of supernatural occurrences as legitimate proof of guilt. This controversial form of evidence was often unreliable and subjective, yet it played a significant role in the proceedings. The accused were subjected to intense interrogations and physical examinations during which any perceived abnormality was seen as evidence of witchcraft. They were also subjected to coercive tactics and pressure to confess, with the promise of mercy for those who admitted their guilt. Those who maintained their innocence faced skepticism and suspicion, as they were believed to be in league with the devil for denying their supposed involvement in witchcraft. Over 20 innocent men and women were executed as a result of the trials, while many others faced imprisonment, ruin, or exile. The Salem Witch Trials serve as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked paranoia, collective mania, and the willingness to abandon reason in favor of fear. Beyond the loss of innocent lives, the events in Salem struck a blow to the very foundations of trust, compassion, and justice within the community. The trials revealed the dangers of religious fanatics, the manipulation of societal fears, and the potential for abuse within the legal system. We will embark on this exploration of the Salem Witch Trials by examining the cultural, religious, and social factors that contributed to the tragedy. We will strive to gain a greater understanding of the human capacity for fear, hysteria, and redemption. Through a lens of historical analysis and compassionate exploration, we hope to shed light on the dark corners of our collective past and find lessons that will guide us toward a more inclusive and just future. All right, so let's look further into this. I'm going to break our exploration down into 9 parts. Part number 1, the troubled times of Puritan New England. Number 2, a dark cloud descends on Salem Village. Number 3, the accused, women caught in the witch hunt. Number 4, the role of religion and superstition in the trials. Number 5, the infamous accusers, unraveling motives and influences. Number 6, the legal system, trials and convictions. Number 7, punishments and executions, the cost of witchcraft. Number 8, the aftermath, healing and reconciliation. And number 9, lessons from the Salem Witch Trials, reflections on history. All right, we're going to start with part number 1, the troubled times of Puritan New England. In order to understand the events that led to the Salem Witch Trials, it is necessary to delve deeper into the tumultuous era of Puritan New England. The Puritans, who sought religious freedom, embarked on a perilous journey to the New World in the early 17th century. Their ultimate goal was to create a society founded on their strict interpretation of the Christian Bible, fostering a moral existence that would serve as a shining example to the world. Arriving in the unfamiliar and challenging land of New England, the Puritans faced an array of adversities that tested the strength of their faith. The harsh and unpredictable environment proved to be a daunting obstacle. With long, bitter winters and a rugged terrain, farming proved to be a difficult task, leading to constant struggles against scarcity and hunger. The Puritans had to adapt their agricultural practices and rely heavily on communal efforts to overcome these challenges and ensure their survival. The Puritans encountered a complex and strained relationship with the indigenous Native American tribes. The Native Americans viewed the Puritan settlers as invaders, encroaching upon their territories and disrupting their way of life. This led to tension and a series of conflicts that occasionally erupted into violence. The Puritans' efforts to create their utopia clashed with the native population's desire to maintain their sovereignty and cultural autonomy, creating a deep-seated resentment that added to the difficulties of coexistence. The Puritans saw their journey to the New World as an opportunity to establish a righteous society, chosen by God to bring forth His will. They embraced a strict code of conduct that governed every aspect of their lives. While the Puritans sought liberation from religious persecution, they themselves were deeply intolerant of differing religious beliefs. They aimed to create a close-knit community that excluded dissenting opinions and alternative ideologies. This intolerance extended not only to those outside their faith, but also created divisions within their own ranks, leading to internal conflicts. Of course, the Puritans firmly believed that any deviation from their religious tenets indicated moral corruption and made individuals susceptible to the influence of the devil. This conviction, coupled with the hardships they endured and a pervasive fear of divine retribution fostered an atmosphere characterized by suspicion and paranoia. This climate heightened their sensitivity to any signs of the supernatural and the presence of witchcraft within their society. Their religious worldview was deeply rooted in a literal interpretation of the Bible, with a particular focus on the concept of predestination, the belief that God had already determined the fate of individuals and that their actions were preordained, created an intense anxiety in the Puritan mind. They lived in constant fear of straying from the path chosen for them, fearful that any deviation or perceived sin would lead to eternal damnation. Witchcraft was viewed as a sinister force that threatened the moral fabric of society. The Puritans, influenced by their English roots, brought this deep-rooted fear of witchcraft to the New World. They believed that witches made dangerous pacts with the devil, gaining supernatural powers to bring harm to others. The presence of witchcraft was seen as a direct challenge to the divine mission of their newly established community, and any perceived witches were seen as dangerous outliers who needed to be eradicated. Understanding these circumstances is paramount to comprehending the motivations and actions of both the accused and the accusers during the Salem Witch Trials. All right, that brings us to part number 2. A dark cloud descends on Salem village. In the late 17th century, the small Puritan community of Salem Village in Massachusetts found itself engulfed in a dark cloud of fear and suspicion. The events that unfolded during this period would become known as the Salem Witch Trials. The origins of this dark chapter in history can be traced back to the simmering tensions within the village. The villagers firmly believed that witches were in league with the devil, wreaking havoc and causing misfortunes within the community. Any misfortune, whether it be illness, crop failure, or even personal disputes, were often attributed to the dark arts of witchcraft. The first signs of trouble appeared when young girls in the village began experiencing mysterious fits and afflictions. These girls, whose strange behavior would become the catalyst for the trials, claimed to be tormented by unseen forces. Their accusations soon targeted members of the community, especially women, who they believed were practitioners of witchcraft. The trials had begun. The afflicted girls exhibited symptoms that ranged from contorting their bodies in unnatural ways to convulsions and bizarre vocalizations. Doctors of the time were unable to explain these phenomena, leaving people desperate for answers. It's essential to note that the girls' symptoms could have a psychological or physiological cause. Historians and scholars today suggest that their fits could stem from a combination of stress, repressed desires, and religious fervor. The Puritan society imposed strict codes of behavior and limited roles and opportunities available to women. The girls' afflictions may have been a desperate cry for attention and an outlet for their frustrations. As the accusations spread, fear and paranoia spread like wildfire throughout Salem Village. People became suspicious of their neighbors, friends, and even their own family. A climate of panic and hysteria gripped the community, leading to a frenzied search for witches. Upstanding members of the community, including churchgoers and respected individuals, found themselves branded as witches. Rebecca Nurse, a pious and respected woman, was one such victim. Her arrest and subsequent execution shocked the community. No one was safe from the accusation that led to arrests, trials, and ultimately executions. The legal system of the time considered confessions as the most powerful evidence, and those who maintained their innocence were deemed defiant against the court and held in even greater suspicion. One particularly troubling aspect of the accusations was the role of hearsay and spectral evidence. The girls claimed to see invisible specters tormenting them, and the court accepted this as evidence of witchcraft. This reliance on spectral evidence, along with the frenzy of accusations, undermined the already flawed legal system, leading to a grave miscarriage of justice. All right, in case some of you are wondering, what the heck is spectral evidence? Spectral evidence was testimony in which witnesses claimed that the accused appeared to them and did them harm in a dream or a vision. It was believed that witches could project themselves spiritually either directly or with the aid of Satan in order to harm their victims from afar. So you have a bad dream about somebody, and you could claim this as proof in court, evidence against the accused. Now, during this very dark period, innocent people were hanged, and one man was pressed to death, all accused of practicing witchcraft. Lives were shattered, families torn apart, and the entire community traumatized by the events that had unfolded. The trials cast a shadow over Salem Village that would linger for generations. The story of the dark cloud that descended upon Salem Village serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us of the devastating consequences that can arise when fear and hysteria reign supreme. This illustrates the extent to which fear can consume a community and distort reality. In times of distress and uncertainty, people often turn to scapegoats as a means of regaining control of their lives. The accusations and subsequent trials in Salem Village reveal the dangerous consequences of unchecked paranoia and the power of mass hysteria. The trials revealed the inherent flaws of the legal system at that time. While the court system aimed to seek justice, the process was heavily biased, and the burden of proof often fell on the accused. Confessions were obtained through physical and psychological torture, leading many innocent individuals to admit crimes they did not commit, simply to end their suffering. The impact of Salem witch trials on both the accused and the accusers cannot be understated. All right, part number 3. The accused, women caught in the witch hunt. In the dark and tumultuous days of the Salem witch trials, women found themselves at the center of a storm they could never have anticipated. Accusations of witchcraft brought fear and suspicion upon the innocent, leading to devastating consequences. The targets of these accusations were not chosen at random, but rather seemed to reflect certain patterns. Many of the accused were women who did not conform to societal norms, exhibiting behaviors and qualities that deviated from the expected. These included women who were fiercely independent. I would have been screwed. Outspoken, again, I would have been screwed. And held unconventional beliefs in a rigid and patriarchal society. Their uniqueness made them vulnerable to suspicion and scrutiny. Among the accused were also those who held positions of power or influence, further intensifying the backlash against them. Women who possessed knowledge, whether it be of herbs and remedies or of religious teachings, were viewed with suspicion and distrust. Their perceived ability to challenge the existing order, both in terms of gender roles and traditional authority, made them easy targets for the growing hysteria surrounding witchcraft. The witch hunt also targeted individuals who did not conform to societal beauty ideals or possessed physical abnormalities. Women who were elderly, disfigured, or who had birthmarks or other distinctive characteristics were often labeled as witches. These physical distinctions, which set them apart from the accepted standards of beauty, only served to fuel suspicions that they had made pacts with the devil. It's important to note that not all of the accused were outsiders or rebels. Many were ordinary women, leading simple lives and fulfilling their roles within the community. However, in the climate of fear and paranoia in Salem Village, even these women were not immune to accusations. Petty disputes, rivalries, and personal grievances often played a significant role in fueling the accusations, resulting in innocent women being thrown into the vortex of the witch hunts. The witch trials offered an outlet for pent-up tensions and resentments, allowing individuals to express their frustrations and enact revenge on those they felt had wronged them. Women who had dared to challenge established power dynamics, who had questioned the norms enforced upon them, or who had simply displayed intelligence and ambition, became convenient scapegoats for their community's anxieties and insecurities. Their testimonies were perceived with skepticism, as their voices were often dismissed as products of hysteria or witchcraft-induced hallucinations. In many instances, women were subjected to humiliating and degrading examinations, including the famous witch tests that were conducted to determine guilt or innocence. These tests, such as the drowning test or the pricking test, only served to further victimize the accused. What was the drowning test, you ask? Accused witches were dragged to the nearest body of water, stripped to their undergarments, bound, and then tossed in to see if they would sink or float. Since witches were believed to have spurned the sacrament of baptism, it was thought that the water would reject their bodies and prevent them from submerging. According to this logic, an innocent person would sink like a stone, but a witch would simply bob on the surface. The victim typically had a rope tied around their waist so they could be pulled from the water if they sank, but it wasn't unusual for accidental drowning deaths to occur with this practice. Or how about the pricking test? What was that? If witch hunters struggled to find obvious evidence of witches' marks on a suspect's body, they would resort to the practice of pricking as a means of finding out. Witches were thought to be insensitive to pain and couldn't bleed, so examiners used specially designed needles to repeatedly stab and prick at the accused person's flesh until they discovered a spot that produced the desired results. Just messed up. I mean, these are just two of the tests performed. There were many others. Just disturbing stuff here, folks. Hysteria and fear gripped the courtroom, often overshadowing any search for truth or justice. The consequences for those accused of witchcraft were severe. The majority faced imprisonment, with conditions in the jails being just awful. Some endured months of confinement in cramped and unsanitary cells, often resulting in deteriorating health before they even reached trial. Those found guilty faced the horrifying prospect of execution by hanging. The Salem Witch Trials vividly illustrate how society's fear and suspicion can be weaponized against those who dare to challenge oppressive structure. The lives of these accused women, their experiences, and their sacrifices illuminate the relentless struggle for equality and the consequences of unchecked prejudice. Within these trials, we also witness the deep impact of patriarchal systems and the suppression of female power. The witch hunt was a manifestation of society's desperate attempt to maintain control over women, to enforce conformity and submissive behavior, and to eradicate any resemblance of female autonomy. By labeling these women as witches and condemning them to death, the patriarchy sought to quell any form of rebellion, ensuring that the established power dynamics remained intact. The Salem Witch Trials were not isolated incidents, but rather a part of a broader pattern of witch hunts that occurred throughout Europe and its colonies during the 16th and 17th centuries. Behind the labels of witches stood real women with hopes, dreams, and aspirations. They were mothers, daughters, wives, and friends whose lives were cut short by a suffocating fear that clouded judgment and allowed baseless accusations to run rampant. The legacy of these women serves as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked prejudice, the importance of upholding justice and fairness, and the ongoing struggle for gender equality. All right, part number 4. The role of religion and superstition in the trials. The Puritans' religious worldview was heavily influenced by Calvinism, a Protestant theological system that emphasized predestination and the concept of a covenant with God. The Puritans saw themselves as the chosen few, the elect, predestined from birth to be saved or damned. This belief instilled in them a sense of duty and responsibility to live godly lives, constantly seeking signs of God's favor or punishment. Within this framework, witchcraft represented a sinister force aligned with the devil, threatening to corrupt the godly society they sought to build. The Puritans believed that witches, who were primarily seen as women, had made a pact with the devil, gaining supernatural powers in exchange for their souls. This belief stemmed from biblical passages that explicitly condemned witchcraft, such as Exodus 22:18, which states, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." The Puritans interpreted such passages quite literally, firmly believing in the reality of witchcraft and its inherent danger to their community. The clergy held immense power and influence within the Puritan society. Their teachings emphasized the dangers of sin, the importance of rigid moral codes, and the constant vigilance required to resist the devil's temptations. Ministers frequently delivered sermons that reinforced the fears and suspicions surrounding witchcraft, emphasizing the reality of the supernatural and the ever present threat of demonic forces. Their teaching played a crucial role in instilling fear and paranoia within the community, as individuals were constantly reminded of the potential consequences of engaging in witchcraft or associating with witches. Superstition was also deeply ingrained in the culture of colonial New England. Folk beliefs, oral traditions, and local customs all contributed to a world where the supernatural was considered very real. People turned to charms and folk remedies to protect themselves against malevolent forces, seeking solace in rituals meant to ward off evil spirits. These superstitious practices often conflated with notions of witchcraft, further fueling the anxieties surrounding the perceived threat. When the accusations of witchcraft began to emerge in Salem Village in 1692, this pervasive religious and superstitious worldview provided fertile ground for the seeds of mass hysteria to take root. The community, already primed by their religious teachings, became consumed by fear and suspicion. People began to search for signs of witchcraft in their friends, neighbors, and even family members, driven by their terror of falling under suspicion themselves. Trivial incidents or peculiar behavior were magnified and attributed to the influence of witchcraft, further fueling the paranoia that swept through the community. The influence of religion and superstition extended beyond mere beliefs, shaping the legal proceedings and courtrooms of the era. The Puritans saw themselves as soldiers in a spiritual war against the forces of darkness. As they battled against physical threats, they also battled against the supernatural. When examining the Salem Witch Trials, it's important to consider the multidimensional factors at play. And that brings us to part number 5. The infamous accusers, unraveling motives and influences. As the Salem Witch Trials unfolded, one of the most perplexing aspects was the role played by the accusers. These individuals were at the heart of the hysteria, pointing their fingers at fellow villagers and accusing them of practicing witchcraft. A deeper examination of the social, cultural, and physiological influence reveals a much more complex web of motivations behind their actions. The accusers, some of whom came from influential families, may have used the witch trials as an opportunity to settle scores or gain leverage over their enemies. By accusing others of witchcraft, they could tarnish their reputations, destroy their social standing, and gain control over economic or political resources. Members of the community also saw advantage in supporting the accusations, believing that by cooperating and pointing fingers at their neighbors, they could deflect suspicion away from themselves. The accusers in this context became pawns in a larger game of power and self-preservation. In addition to internal dynamics, external events played a significant role in shaping the accusations during the Salem Witch Trials. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was confronted with numerous challenges at the time, including Native American attacks, outbreaks of smallpox, and political tensions within neighboring communities. As the pressure mounted to maintain a united front against external threats, the creation of scapegoats in the form of accused witches became a convenient way to divert attention from these pressing issues. By blaming supernatural forces for their misfortunes, the community sought to reaffirm their sense of morality, superiority, and control over their destiny. Part number 6, the legal system, trials, and convictions. Within the chaos and fear that gripped Salem Village during the dark days of the witch trials, A legal system attempted to bring order and justice to the proceedings. The very nature of the trials and the prevailing beliefs of the time made it difficult to ensure a fair and unbiased process for those accused. The legal system during the Salem Witch Trials was deeply rooted in the religious beliefs of the Puritan settlers. Their interpretation of the Bible and their adherence to their strict moral code shaped the way the trials were conducted. The trials began with the arrest of individuals accused of practicing witchcraft. Once apprehended, these accused individuals were brought before a local magistrate for examination. This magistrate, often a male authority figure, would oversee the initial interrogation and assessment of the accused's guilt or innocence. During this examination, those accused were questioned by magistrates and local officials who sought to gather enough evidence to further their case. The accused were often subjected to intense questioning, pressure, and even physical abuse in a bid to elicit a confession. In many cases, the accused were isolated and deprived of sleep, food, and water, hoping to weaken their resistance and break their will. The interrogations were emotionally and psychologically exhausting, weighing on the accused who faced intense pressure to provide a confession. Some accused individuals, fearing for their lives or desperate for the torment to end, eventually succumbed and confessed to practicing witchcraft. Confessions, whether coerced or genuine, were a critical aspect of the legal process. Once an accused individual confessed to practicing witchcraft, it was often seen as irrefutable evidence by the court. The confession alone convinced many authorities of guilt, regardless of any other evidence presented. It's crucial to understand the pressures and circumstances surrounding these confessions. The accused were often met with the assurance that confessing would grant them leniency and redemption within the community. Many genuinely believed that admitting their involvement with witchcraft was the only way to save their lives and preserve their souls. In cases where a confession was not obtained, the court relied on spectral evidence. This form of evidence held significant weight in the eyes of the court, despite its questionable reliability and subjectivity. Spectral evidence was founded on the belief that witches could send out their spirits to afflict and harm their victims. Witnesses would testify that they had seen the accused specter appearing before them, causing them pain and disturbing their lives. This form of testimony was deeply rooted in superstition and fear, leading to the acceptance of often baseless accusations. The judges and magistrates presiding over the trial were themselves influenced by the general hysteria and fear that permeated Salem Village. This bias often seeped into their decision-making process, further compromising the fairness of the trials. The trials were held in public, allowing the community to witness the proceedings. Witnesses, both for the prosecution and the defense, were called to testify, and evidence was presented to support or challenge the accusations. The courtroom environment during the Salem Witch Trials was far from impartial. Spectators, fueled by superstition and fear, often exerted pressure on witnesses and even the judges themselves. This pressure frequently led to the exclusion of vital evidence or the acceptance of unreliable witness testimonies. The lack of legal representation for the accused also undermined the fairness of the trials. Many accused individuals, unfamiliar with legal proceedings and overwhelmed by the circumstances, were left to navigate the intricacies of the court system on their own. Their lack of knowledge and resources put them at severe disadvantage, making it easier for the prosecution to secure a conviction. If found guilty, the punishment for those convicted of witchcraft was severe. The most common form of punishment was hanging. Others faced imprisonment, torturous interrogations, or pressing, a cruel punishment where heavy stones were placed on the accused's body until they provided a plea. The trials, as chaotic and biased as they were, continued until the community's faith in the justice system began to waver. Okay, just picture this. You're accused of witchcraft. You were laid down, and heavy stones are placed upon you until you plead guilty. You're eventually going to plead guilty to save your own life. It's insanity. As the accusations spiraled out of control and innocent lives were lost, doubts started to emerge, ultimately leading to a decline in the fervor surrounding the trials. The legal system during the Salem Witch Trials was deeply flawed, heavily influenced by superstition, fear, and personal biases. The lack of a fair trial process, the acceptance of coerced confessions and spectral evidence, and the absence of legal representation for the accused created an environment ripe for hysteria and injustice. It stands as a grim reminder of the dangers of a justice system guided by fear rather than reason, and the importance of ensuring a fair and unbiased legal process for all. These witch trials had a significant impact on the development of the American legal system. The atrocities committed during this dark period prompted reevaluation and reflection on the principles of justice and the reliance on evidence-based trials. That brings us to number 7. Punishments and executions, the cost of witchcraft. In the dark era of the Salem Witch Trials, the notion of witchcraft was not taken lightly. The Puritan settlers of New England firmly believed in the existence of malevolent forces and saw the witch as a vessel for evil. As a result, those who were accused of practicing witchcraft faced a horrifying fate, punishment, and in many cases, execution. The punishments inflicted upon the accused witches were designed to make them confess their alleged crimes. One method, already mentioned here, was known as pressing. The victim's body would be subjected to heavy stones being piled upon them until they either confessed or succumbed to the weight. So either you confess or you die. This brutal practice aimed to break their will and extract a confession, often resulting in excruciating physical agony and even death. Another form of punishment was the use of ducking stools. Accused witches were tied to a chair and submerged repeatedly in bodies of water such as rivers or ponds. It was believed that if a witch was truly guilty, the water would reject her and she would remain buoyant, thus proving her guilt. If she sank and drowned, it was taken as an indication of her innocence, albeit a fatal one. Once found guilty, the accused witches faced execution by hanging. This was a common method used against those convicted of witchcraft, as it was considered a just and fitting punishment for engaging in activities that consorted with the devil. The hangings were public spectacles, drawing crowds of onlookers who watched in both fascination and horror as the lives of alleged witches were abruptly cut short. The list of executed witches during the Salem Witch Trials is a chilling testament to the hysteria and paranoia of the time. 20 individuals, mostly women, met their demise on Gallows Hill. Among them, Rebecca Nurse, an elderly woman respected in her community, and John Proctor, a man of strong character who refused to admit guilt to a crime he did not commit. Each execution further fueled the frenzy, sending shockwaves through the tightly knit society of Salem Village. The aftermath of the witch trials was a somber period for Salem Village. The execution of innocent individuals weighed heavily on the collective conscience of the community. While some individuals faced the harsh reality of their actions, others lived with the burden of falsely accusing their neighbors. The reputations of those involved were forever tarnished, and the stain of the trials lingered for generations. Attempts at healing and reconciliation followed in the aftermath of the trials, but the scars remain. The government issued apologies, and the surviving accused were released from prison, but the damage inflicted upon Salem Village was irreversible. The community faced a long and arduous path towards rebuilding trust and a sense of normalcy. Reflecting upon the punishments and executions of the Salem Witch Trials, it becomes evident that the cost of believing in witchcraft was immeasurable. Innocent lives were lost, the fabric of society was ripped apart, and the name of Salem became synonymous with paranoia and injustice. The actions taken during this time serve as a stark reminder of the dangers that can arise when fear and superstition override reason and compassion. Part number 8, the aftermath, healing and reconciliation. As the dust settled over the Salem Witch Trials, the community of Salem Village was left in a state of shock and devastation. The once tight-knit community was torn apart by fear, suspicion, and false accusation. With the trials over and the executions completed, the people of Salem Village now faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives and their community. The aftermath of the trials was marked by a collective sense of guilt and remorse. Many who had accused their neighbors and friends of witchcraft now realized the enormity of their actions. The realization that innocent lives had been lost weighed heavily on their hearts. Efforts for healing and reconciliation began as many of the accusers and witnesses came forward to publicly admit their mistakes. They sought forgiveness from those they had falsely accused and from the community as a whole. These confessions were not easy. They required tremendous humility and courage, yet individuals chose to confront their own demons and seek redemption for the pain they had caused. One figure who emerged as a symbol of repentance and reconciliation, a name we mentioned earlier, was Ann Putnam Jr. She was one of the most active accusers during the trials. Ann had played a significant role in the tragedy that had unfolded. In the years following the trial, she publicly recanted her claims, shedding tears of remorse for her actions. In a solemn ceremony at the Salem Village Meeting House, surrounded by community members, Anne stood before them and courageously confessed her role in the hysteria. Her act of contrition was met with mixed reactions, as some forgave her, while others harbored deep resentment. Anne's public confession marked a pivotal moment in the healing process. The community recognized that healing required more than mere words. Concrete actions were necessary to rebuild trust and restore a sense of justice. Mediation sessions were held, facilitated by respected community elders, where individuals could openly express their grievances and seek forgiveness. These sessions aimed to create a safe space for open dialogue, allowing people to confront the pain and resentment they had experienced. In some cases, these sessions led to the restoration of broken bonds and the reestablishment of trust, while in others, the wounds ran too deep to be easily mended. The mere act of engaging in these conversations was a testament to the community's commitment to healing. The legal system also played a vital role in the aftermath of the trials. In 1693, the Massachusetts General Court passed a bill that not only restored the rights and good names of those who had been wrongfully accused or convicted of witchcraft, but also provided financial reparations to their families. This act could not undo the pain and suffering that had been endured by the innocent. It did, however, serve as an official acknowledgement of the grave injustices that had occurred and a starting point for collective healing. The government's willingness to rectify its past mistakes signaled to the community that steps were being taken to ensure such tragedy would not be repeated. Religious leaders in Salem Village played a significant part in promoting healing and reconciliation as well. Sermons were delivered that emphasized the importance of forgiveness and reminded the congregation of their Christian duty to love thy neighbor. Ministers and pastors delivered heartfelt messages, urging their people to reflect on the events that had transpired and the detrimental effects of division and suspicion. These sermons aimed to instill a sense of unity and compassion within the community, reminding them that forgiveness was not only a moral obligation, but a necessary step for their own healing as well. Despite these efforts, the scars of the Salem Witch Trials lingered for years to come. The community of Salem Village would forever be marked by this dark chapter in history. Families were broken, reputations were tarnished, and the fabric of the community was forever altered. Over time, the wounds began to heal, slowly but surely. Salem Village regained some sense of normalcy. The community learned from the travesty they had endured and implemented changes to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. They endeavored to strengthen the bonds of community, to cultivate empathy, and to value evidence-based justice. As we reflect on the aftermath of the Salem Witch Trials, we are reminded of the importance of compassion, understanding, and standing up against injustice. All right, and that brings us to the final part number 9. Lessons from the Salem Witch Trials, Reflections on History. The Salem Witch Trials, one of the most infamous episodes in American history, reverberate throughout the corridors of time as a chilling reminder of the dangers posed by fear, hysteria, and prejudice. Though the events unfolded over 300 years ago in the quaint village of Salem, Massachusetts, where Puritan beliefs reigned supreme, the echoes of this tragedy continue to hold valuable lessons for our society today. Digging deeper into the Salem Witch Trials, we unearth a complex web of factors that contributed to the outbreak of mass paranoia and the subsequent persecution of innocent individuals. The roots of this tragedy can be traced back to a combination of religious fervor, political instability, economic tensions, and societal pressures that created a perfect breeding ground for fear and suspicion. The Puritan belief system of the time, deeply ingrained in the lives of the villagers, viewed anything outside the norm as a threat to their strictly defined moral code. The early settlers of New England brought with them a strong belief in their divine mission to create a model society, a city upon a hill. This ideology instilled a sense of exceptionalism and moral righteousness in the Puritans, fueling their conviction that they were in constant spiritual warfare against sin and evil forces. They clung to the notion that any deviation from their strict religious doctrines was a direct challenge to God's plan, leading to constant self-examination and suspicion within the community. In the 17th century, the line between religion and government was blurred, and the Salem village community found itself embroiled in political conflicts that added fuel to the fire. The village, predominantly an agricultural community, faced economic challenges exacerbated by the widening gap between wealthy coastal areas and struggling inland regions. This wealth disparity contributed to simmering feelings of frustration and dissatisfaction, laying the groundwork for deeper divisions within the community. Against this backdrop of religious fervor, political strife, and economic disparities, the Salem Witch Trials took their tragic turn in 1692, fueled by fear, gossip, and an insatiable desire to assign blame. The accusations against witches spread like wildfire. The tight-knit community, once cohesive, descended into an abyss of paranoia, with finger-pointing and accusations running rampant. The accused endured a grueling ordeal face-to-face with a legal system stacked against them. In a twisted perversion of justice, the courts eagerly embraced spectral evidence as a basis for prosecution. The acceptance of this unfounded and subjective evidence underscored the absence of objective scrutiny, a glaring disregard for reasoned thinking and critical analysis. And, behind the scenes, darker motives and personal vendettas lurked. The trials were a fertile ground for individuals to exploit the hysteria for personal gain or to settle old scores. The accusations often targeted those who were marginalized, independent, or did not conform to societal norms, such as women exhibiting unconventional traits or members of lower social classes. These vulnerable groups bore the brunt of the witch hunt, as their perceived differences fed into the suspicions of the Puritan community. Reflecting on the Salem Witch Trials, it becomes evident that they represent more than just a cautionary tale. They expose the frailties of human nature and reveal the dangerous consequences of unchecked fear and prejudice. The tragedy of Salem prompts introspection, urging us to acknowledge our capacity to succumb to mass hysteria and discriminatory practices. It compels us to question our own tendencies towards judgment and bias. The lessons we learn from the Salem Witch Trials should serve as a constant reminder of the need to foster critical thinking, skepticism, and empathy in our society. They echo the call for fair treatment, justice, and the protection of individual rights and liberties, the very core of a just society. By carefully dissecting the factors that led to this dark chapter in history, we unearth opportunities for growth, paving the path towards a future characterized by understanding, inclusivity, and the eradication of prejudice. The Salem Witch Trials unveil the raw emotions, complexities, and vulnerabilities of human existence, reminding us of the importance of empathy, compassion, and vigilance against the forces that can tear communities apart. Through a deeper understanding of the Salem Witch Trials, we transcend the boundaries of time and space, carrying these lessons into our own lives and lending our voices to the collective cry for justice. The legacy of Salem teaches us that our actions in the present influence the narratives of the future. It is our responsibility to ensure that history does not repeat itself. Moving forward with an unwavering commitment to equality, justice, and the preservation of individual freedoms. What are your thoughts? Send them my way to truth@majestictruth.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, Truth Seekers, that concludes this episode of Majestic Truth. I hope you've enjoyed exploring the depths of the unknown with us today. Remember, the pursuit of truth and the quest for knowledge are ongoing journeys. So stay curious, stay open-minded, always follow your dreams, and keep seeking those answers. Next week, get ready to embark on a journey through the mysterious skies of our nation's capital. Join us as we delve into one of the most perplexing and enduring UFO mysteries of all time, the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO flap. In July of 1952, the world watched in awe and disbelief as unidentified flying objects were repeatedly spotted over the nation's capital. This extraordinary event sent shockwaves through the highest levels of government and the military. But what really happened during those fateful nights? We will explore the government's response, the theories and speculations, and the enduring legacy of this fascinating event. Was it a secret military experiment, a weather anomaly, or something beyond our wildest imagination? Don't miss it. Alrighty. For more information on this episode about the Salem Witch Trials, visit majestictruth.com/episode 14. And if you have your own theories or stories to share about UFOs and other conspiracies, reach out to us on social media or email us at truth@majestictruth.com. Thanks for joining me, Truth Seekers. I'm grateful for every listener and humbled by every subscriber. Don't forget to mark your calendars and set your alarms because our next episode will be available Tuesday on your favorite podcast app. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. Until then, keep your eyes in the skies, your mind open, and remember, the truth is out there.
For updates, behind-the-scenes content, and a chance to engage with fellow truth seekers, stay connected with us on social media. Find us on Twitter at TruthSeekerPod, Instagram at Majestic Truth Seekers, and TikTok at Majestic Truth Seekers. Tune in next week as we explore the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO flap. Thanks for listening.